What is history? What does it mean to do history, to write history? A very simple way to focus it is to think about tomorrow. What are your plans for tomorrow? You could be planning a picnic. You could be planning to do some studying on the internet. You could be planning to go shopping. What could happen that would make your plans change? Well, if it's a picnic, it could rain. It's shopping, your car could break down. If it's studying, your internet service could go down. If you think about the last two presidential elections, 2016 and 2020, there were two main candidates, and everybody thought their candidate would win. And of course, only one candidate wins. So half of the people were sorely disappointed and quite upset. And it happened twice. So if you think about the day before Election Day, a lot of people were expecting something to happen that did not happen. The future is unpredictable. People have expectations and they turn out to be wrong. The writer Franz Kafka, he wrote the short story, The Metamorphosis, about the guy who wakes up and is a cockroach, which is an unexpected thing that might happen to you. I hope it wouldn't happen to you, but he wrote these little parables, and I'd like to read you one, kind of loosely translated. Leopards break into the temple and drink all the blood from the sacrificial urns. This happens again and again. Eventually, the leopards' visits can be predicted, and they become a part of the ritual. You don't expect something to happen. It happens. And if it happens often enough, it just becomes part of reality. So to do history, to write history, to research history, you have to go back and figure out what happened that was unexpected. And was it a fluke, or did it become a kind of a new routine? And then a very reasonable question to ask yourself is, well, how much information do I need to do that? Like, how much research do I need to do? How many comparisons do I need to make in order to uncover some kind of historical pattern? So let's consider the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey from 1968. In 1968, that movie was number 2 at the box office. And the budget was only $10.5 million. Initially, the budget was $6 million, but it cost $4.5 million more than they thought. So put yourself back in 1968. There's this movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey. It makes a lot of money. It costs a lot of money, but it made a lot of money. You're a movie producer. What are you going to do? I would think you would try and make another 2001. I would think that a lot of producers in 1968 saw 2001, and somebody must have thought, well, it made a lot of money. I should try and do that. So when do you think the next top 2 box office sci-fi movie was after 2001? 1969, 1970, 1971? No, it was 1977. And the top 2 box office films were Star Wars and Close Encounters. Now, those are wonderful films, but they're nothing like 2001. I mean, they're not really ripoffs at all. But it took that long. It took 9 years for someone to figure out how to make a top 2, number 1 or number 2 box office sci-fi film. Well, why did it take so long? Well, you might think the limiting factor was talent. The special effects in 2001, A Space Odyssey, were very, very good. They're by a guy named Douglas Trumbull. He also did the special effects for Close Encounters. So you could easily imagine he was the secret sauce. The reason it took so long to make another top 2 sci-fi movie was special effects talent was that limited. But that's really not the case. If you look at Doug Trumbull's career, he made a movie in 1971 called The Andromeda Strain. It was number 15 at the box office. It cost $6.5 million and made $12 million. It was okay, but it was not number 1 or 2. He made a film called Silent Running in 1972. That wasn't even in the top 20. Eventually, in 1982, he made a little film called Blade Runner, which made $39 million worldwide. And that was, in a way, the next sci-fi film that had the philosophical issue about the tension between man and machines. It was robots instead of computers, but it was that kind of idea. Now, that was only number 29 at the box office, Blade Runner, but it did have the same theme. Now, looking at the Trumbull films, we can see that was not a common theme, and that's not the theme in Close Encounters. Either. So if you look ahead a little, the next time there's a movie with that theme, if you switch from was it Trumbull to where was that theme and when did it make money? Okay, there's Blade Runner, 1982, number 27 at the U.S. box office. Then there's Terminator in 1984, and that's about computers trying to kill humans. I mean, that's right on point. That is the child or grandchild of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, it was number 21 at the box office, so it's the same theme, but it did not have the same performance. Terminator 2 in 1991 was number 1 at the box office. That made $204 million domestically. So from 1968 and A Space Odyssey, sci-fi movie in the top 2 about computers and humans being pitted against each other, to Terminator 2 in 1991 on the same theme, same very good top 2 box office performance. That's a 23-year gap. So it takes 23 years to rip off an idea like that. And then, of course, you get The Matrix in 1999. That's 31 years later. And it was only number 5 in the box office. I mean, number 1 was Phantom Menace, so that's a lot of competition. So A Space Odyssey was the first huge box office sci-fi film about this tension between humans and computers. And it took a long time to be able to imitate that kind of success. It was a good idea. It proved to be good at the box office. It was just very hard to rip off. So we have this assumption that in Hollywood, if something is a success, it's imitated. Is that not true? Well, if you look at those other films and you look at 2001: A Space Odyssey, 2001 was not a franchise. There was a sequel, but it was not super successful. Terminator, Star Wars isn't on that theme exactly. But if you get Terminator, The Matrix, those are franchises, right? And Star Wars is a top-grossing sci-fi that's also a franchise. So if you're looking for comparisons of top-grossing sci-fi films, really, in order for sci-fi films to do that, they have to be franchises. And the top-grossing films of all time are franchises, where you build up a big audience and you do it over time. So it would seem like in 1968 they didn't have that concept, right? Like, we know what franchises are, and we know you make a lot of films on the same theme and with the same characters, and it attracts the same people keep coming back, and hopefully more and more. And you might think, well, it's 1968, they didn't have that. But that's not true. They did have that. In 1968, there was a movie called Planet of the Apes, and it generated a series of sequels, 70, 71, 72, 73. They did pretty well, too. Planet of the Apes, the 1968 original, was number 7 at the box office. The next 2, in 70 and 71, were number 16 at the box office. And 72 and 73 were number 19 at the box office. And they eventually remade the whole series. So franchises were a thing. The guy who did the Planet of the Apes was from television. He was Rod Serling. He had done Twilight Zone. So he knew how to make a bunch of stories on the same topic. This was not like a kind of a new skill for him. But look how long it took if you go from, say, 1968, Planet of the Apes, successful franchise but not top of the box office, to something like the Matrix or Star Wars in the 70s or 80s or 90s. It took a long time for the Matrix, the franchise idea to really take off. So how many comparisons do you need to do to get an analysis that discloses these kinds of similarities and differences? Well, we started looking at the top 2 films for a period of 9 or 10 years, so that's about 20 comparisons. Then we looked at the genre and the theme over a period of 30 years. What were films that were sci-fi, and we were looking for high box office too, or at least top 20, that were on the man versus machine theme. So over 30 years, top 20 films, that's about 600 comparisons we were making. You have to do a lot of comparing in order to find this pattern. So what did we do? We looked we found something unusual. We looked for something that was similar in terms of box office and genre, and then also in terms of theme. And that kind of brought us further to the point where we had to realize that our comparison involved sequels and franchises, and that kind of rounded out the picture. We still have this question: why did it take so long to imitate 2001, to make a top 1 or 2 box office film about humans versus machines? Well, sometimes it seems like the leopards just don't come back that often. It's really hard to make the leopards come back. In the parable, it just sounds like, well, they just keep coming back. That was a really good idea, 2001, Man vs. Machine, because look at how many high box office films it generated. But the people who made those films, people like James Cameron or the Wachowskis, were super talented and super skillful and had a good track record. So an idea can take a long time to copy, a good idea, but a good idea is very rare. And actually, to fulfill the idea properly and really succeed with it, it takes a lot of talent. So it's not just that leopards don't come around that often. It's also that the supply of sacrificial blood is not that big.